The air inside the tunnel is thick with the smell of damp concrete and diesel exhaust. 300 feet below the streets of Khan Yunis, a single LED panel flickers against the carved stone walls, casting long shadows that twist and stretch like something alive. The tunnel is narrow, wide enough for 2 men to pass shoulder to shoulder, but no more. The ceiling presses low. Every breath echoes. A convoy of Hamas operatives moves through the corridor in silence. At the center of the formation is a man in his early 40s, dressed in civilian clothes, dark trousers, a plain jacket, no insignia. His name is never spoken aloud. That is the protocol. He is a battalion commander, directly responsible for coordinating rocket strikes and ambush operations across the southern Gaza Strip. He moves with his security detail, 4 men armed with AK-47s, through a labyrinth that was designed to be invisible. Above ground, Israeli drones circle. Thermal sensors sweep rooftops. Facial recognition systems scan every checkpoint and intersection. But down here, none of that matters. The tunnels are Hamas's advantage, built over 15 years at a cost exceeding $1 billion. Over 400 miles of passageways, branching into command centers, weapon depots, and safe rooms buried beneath hospitals, schools, and apartment blocks. The commander stops at an intersection where 3 tunnels converge. One of his escorts checks a handheld radio, the kind that operates on hardwired lines strung through the walls like veins. No signals, no cellular data, no satellite pings, just copper wire, analog voice, and old-fashioned operational security. He does not know it yet, but the Israelis already know he is down here. They know which tunnel, they know his route, and they know exactly when he will emerge. 20 meters behind him, embedded in a seam of the tunnel wall, is a device no larger than a deck of cards. It has been there for 6 days. It transmits nothing. It records everything: sound, movement, air pressure changes. Every 12 hours, it compresses the data into a burst transmission that lasts less than 2 seconds, sent through a relay node hidden in a collapsed shaft 200 meters away. The commander reaches the end of the corridor and climbs a steel ladder toward a concealed exit beneath a residential building. He does not hear the faint mechanical hum that starts 3 levels above him. He does not see the thermal signature blooming on a screen inside an Israeli command post near the border. But someone else does. How did Israeli intelligence penetrate one of the most secure and secretive military infrastructures in the world, buried hundreds of feet underground in one of the most hostile environments on Earth? How did Mossad and Military Intelligence transform an impenetrable fortress into a kill zone? And how did they do it without Hamas ever knowing until it was too late? For more than 15 years, Hamas invested enormous resources into what the Israeli Defense Forces would come to call the Gaza Metro. It is not a metaphor. It is an actual subterranean city spanning between 350 and 450 miles of interconnected tunnels, shafts, storage rooms, command posts, and ambush positions. Some tunnels run just beneath the surface, hidden under mosques and apartment buildings. Others descend more than 200 feet underground, beyond the reach of most conventional munitions. The network was designed with one purpose: to neutralize Israel's overwhelming technological superiority on the surface. Every drone, every satellite, every border sensor becomes irrelevant when the war is fought in the dark, below ground, where signals do not penetrate and maps do not exist. Hamas operatives understood the value of operational security. During the planning of major operations, they abandoned digital communication entirely. No emails, no smartphones, no computers. Instead, they relied on face-to-face meetings and hardwired phone lines embedded in the tunnel walls. For 2 years before a major attack in October 2023, a small cell of operatives communicated exclusively through these analog systems, coordinating in total silence as far as Israeli and American signals intelligence were concerned. That operational discipline worked. It allowed Hamas to plan, train, and execute large-scale operations without triggering a single warning flag in Israeli intelligence databases. The tunnels gave them strategic depth. The communications discipline gave them invisibility. But invisibility has limits. And over time, Israeli intelligence began to realize that the tunnel network was not just Hamas's greatest asset. It was also their greatest vulnerability. Because once you are underground, you are trapped. Your movement is constrained. Your exits are limited. And if someone else knows the map, you are not hidden anymore. You are contained. Israeli strategy to penetrate the tunnel network did not begin with a single operation. It began with years of patient intelligence collection across multiple disciplines, human sources, technical surveillance, captured documents, interrogations, and signals analysis. Mossad and the Shin Bet, Israel's internal security service, maintained an extensive network of informants inside Gaza. These were not high-level operatives. Most were low-level collaborators, individuals with medical needs, criminal records, financial desperation, or personal grievances against Hamas. Some were recruited through coercion, others through opportunity. Israeli intelligence exploited travel permits, access to medical treatment in Israel, and the constant pressure of blockade conditions to turn ordinary people into sources. The intelligence they provided was often mundane, the type of clothes hanging on a balcony outside a specific apartment, the movement of vehicles near a mosque, the presence or absence of armed men at certain hours of the day. But these fragments built patterns, and patterns built a map. Technical surveillance added another layer. Israel developed specialized ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors along the Gaza border, and thermal imaging, systems capable of detecting temperature variations caused by human activity underground. Female soldiers trained in underground intelligence analysis monitored data streams from sensors embedded along the frontier, learning to identify the acoustic signature of digging, the vibration patterns of tunnel traffic, and the telltale signs of ventilation shafts hidden in residential areas. Israeli special forces also conducted high-risk reconnaissance missions. In one operation in November 2018, a 15-man team from an elite unit infiltrated Gaza using vehicles disguised as a local charity. Their mission was to plant surveillance devices capable of intercepting Hamas communications. The operation was compromised. A firefight erupted. An Israeli officer and several Palestinians, including a Hamas commander, were killed. The team extracted under fire. But the mission had already succeeded in part. Equipment was planted, data was collected, and Israeli intelligence learned critical lessons about Hamas's defensive posture and response times. Each piece of intelligence, no matter how small, fed into a centralized database managed by military intelligence and shared with operational units. By the time large-scale combat operations began, Israeli commanders had built what one general described as all-source intelligence on tunnel types, locations, entry points, and defensive positions. They understood the network not as a mystery, but as a map. And once you have a map, you can plan the hunt. Israeli intelligence knew where the tunnels were, but knowing the infrastructure was not enough. What they needed was real-time intelligence on who was using them, when, and why. Hamas commanders did not stay in one place. They moved constantly, rotating between safe houses, underground command posts, and operational cells scattered across the Gaza Strip. Tracking them required a fusion of human intelligence and cutting-edge surveillance technology. Mossad operatives, inside Gaza, working through intermediary networks, placed miniaturized listening devices and motion sensors inside tunnel sections that had been identified through prior reconnaissance. These devices were designed to operate autonomously for weeks at a time, recording audio, detecting movement, and logging patterns of activity without transmitting continuously. Continuous transmission would give them away. Instead, they used burst communication, short, encrypted data packets sent at irregular intervals through relay nodes that were themselves hidden in destroyed buildings or abandoned infrastructure. Above ground, Israeli intelligence deployed artificial intelligence systems that integrated data from drones, satellites, intercepted phone calls, social media scraping, and biometric surveillance at checkpoints. One system, reportedly called Lavender, was designed to identify Hamas operatives by analyzing behavioral patterns, communication metadata, and movement tracking. It could generate target profiles in under 20 seconds, flagging individuals for further surveillance or direct action. But AI alone was not enough. The tunnel network remained opaque to most technical collection methods. What Israeli intelligence needed was human confirmation, and that meant turning people who lived inside the Hamas system. In one case, Israeli handlers recruited a Gaza resident who worked in a municipal office with access to building permits and construction records. Over months, the source provided detailed information about renovations, underground construction, and infrastructure projects that matched known tunnel entry points. In another, a low-level Hamas logistics coordinator, facing financial ruin and pressure from Israeli authorities over a detained family member, began reporting on the movement schedules of senior commanders. None of these sources had complete information, but together, their reports created a mosaic. Israeli intelligence analysts cross-referenced the human reports with signals, intercepts, thermal imaging data, and drone surveillance. Patterns emerged. A specific commander was seen entering a building at certain times. Vehicle convoys followed predictable routes. Tunnel exits were used in coordination with above-ground meetings. And then, in early 2024, one source provided a critical piece of intelligence. A mid-level Hamas commander responsible for coordinating operations in Khan Yunis was scheduled to move through a specific tunnel segment on a specific day to attend a command meeting. The meeting location had already been identified through prior surveillance. The tunnel route had been mapped. The timing was confirmed. Israeli intelligence now had a decision to make. They could strike immediately, using airstrikes or targeted raids, but that would reveal their capabilities and burn the source network. Or they could wait, track, and build a more complete operational picture that could be used to dismantle not just one commander, but an entire cell. They chose to wait, and they chose to go underground. The mission authorization came directly from the highest levels of Israeli military command. A special operations team, composed of combat engineers, intelligence specialists, and counter-tunnel warfare experts, was tasked with entering the tunnel network covertly, confirming the target's location, and either capturing or killing him without alerting Hamas to the broader intelligence operation. This was unprecedented. In previous operations, Israeli forces had avoided entering uncleared Hamas tunnels because of the risk of booby traps, ambushes, and collapse. But a senior division commander, General Goldfuss, had developed a new approach based on lessons learned in northern Gaza. His plan was to enter the tunnels at the same time Israeli forces maneuvered on the surface, using the distraction of above-ground combat to mask underground infiltration. The team entered through a tunnel shaft that had been identified weeks earlier and monitored continuously since. Israeli engineers had already disabled several improvised explosive devices along the approach route, using robotic systems and remote cameras to clear the way. The operatives moved in total silence, using night vision and thermal imaging to navigate the narrow corridors. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. They reached the intersection where intelligence indicated the target would pass. The surveillance device planted days earlier confirmed activity, voices, movement, the faint sound of a convoy approaching from the eastern branch of the tunnel. The team positioned themselves in a side chamber, weapons ready, waiting. And then the target appeared, surrounded by his security detail, moving quickly through the corridor, exactly as the intelligence had predicted. The Israeli team had seconds to decide. Capture was not an option. The escort was too large. The risk of a firefight in the confined space was too high. The order was given silently, with hand signals. The operation lasted less than 30 seconds. Suppressed gunfire, controlled chaos. The target and 2 of his escorts were killed. The remaining Hamas fighters retreated into the tunnel, firing blindly into the dark. The Israeli team extracted through a pre-planned secondary route, collapsing a section of the tunnel behind them with demolition charges to prevent pursuit. By the time Hamas reinforcements arrived, the Israeli team was gone. Above ground, the larger Israeli operation continued, drawing attention away from the underground strike. Hamas initially believed the commander had been killed in an airstrike. It took days before they realized the truth. Someone had been inside their tunnels, moving undetected through their most secure infrastructure. But by then, the operation had already shifted Israeli doctrine. The tunnels were no longer impenetrable. The network was no longer a sanctuary, and Hamas's greatest strategic asset had become a hunting ground. The operation did not end the tunnel war. It marked the beginning of a new phase. Israeli forces adopted the tactics used in Khan Yunis across the entire Gaza Strip, sending specialized units into uncleared tunnels to gather intelligence, plant explosives, and conduct targeted strikes. The psychological impact on Hamas was profound. Commanders who had felt safe underground now had to assume they were being watched, tracked, and targeted even in their deepest bunkers. Mossad Chief David Barnea publicly declared that Israel was committed to tracking down every individual involved in attacks against Israel, whether they were planners, commanders, or support personnel. The targeted killing campaign extended beyond Gaza, reaching operatives in Lebanon, Turkey, and even Tehran, where Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in July 2024. But the operation also raised profound ethical and strategic questions. The use of informants, many of them coerced or blackmailed, turned ordinary civilians into intelligence assets and potential targets for Hamas retaliation. The deployment of AI-driven targeting systems, capable of generating kill lists in seconds, blurred the line between precision warfare and mass surveillance. And the willingness to conduct covert operations deep inside civilian infrastructure meant that the battlefield had no boundaries. Israeli officials argue that these methods are necessary in asymmetric warfare, where the enemy hides among civilians and uses humanitarian protection as a shield. Critics argue that the tactics amount to collective punishment, turning entire populations into surveillance subjects and eroding the distinction between combatant and civilian. There is no clean answer. Intelligence work in environments like Gaza operates in moral gray zones where every decision carries human cost. The informants who provided the intelligence that made the operation possible now live under constant threat of discovery and execution by Hamas. The civilians living above the tunnels had no knowledge of what was happening beneath their homes, yet their lives were placed at risk by the proximity to military infrastructure, and the tunnel network itself remains. Despite extensive Israeli operations to map, clear, and destroy the tunnels, large sections remain intact. Hamas has already begun rebuilding portions of the network, adapting their tactics in response to Israeli innovations. The intelligence war continues, underground and in the shadows, with no clear end in sight. The mission in Khan Yunis demonstrated that even the most secure infrastructure can be penetrated if the intelligence is precise and the risk is calculated. But it also demonstrated the cost: human sources burned, civilian spaces militarized, and the boundaries of warfare pushed further into the dark. If you were the intelligence officer responsible for authorizing the recruitment of a desperate civilian as an informant, knowing their cooperation might lead to their execution, would you make that call? And if you were the commander who sent soldiers into an uncleared tunnel where one wrong step could mean death, would you take that risk to eliminate a single target? These are the questions that define covert operations. There are no easy answers, only choices, consequences, and the shadow war that never ends. The moral weight of intelligence work does not rest in abstract principles. It rests in human lives that become instruments of state power. When an Israeli case officer recruits a Gazan civilian as an informant, they are not simply gathering intelligence. They are creating a relationship built on asymmetry and exploitation. The informant may be coerced through blackmail, through threats against family members, or through the manipulation of desperate circumstances: a sick child who needs medical treatment unavailable in Gaza, a criminal charge that can be dismissed, a travel permit that means the difference between survival and suffocation. The case officer knows the informant is not a willing partner. They know the information being provided places that person under constant risk of discovery and execution by Hamas. And they know that if the informant is caught, there will be no rescue, no extraction, no acknowledgement. The person will simply disappear. Yet the intelligence is essential. It saves lives, it prevents attacks. It allows surgical strikes that might otherwise require broader military action with higher civilian casualties. The officer must balance the harm caused to one person against the harm prevented to many. That is the proportionality calculus that international law demands and that every intelligence professional confronts in the field. But proportionality is not a mathematical equation. It is a moral judgment, made under uncertainty, with incomplete information and irreversible consequences. The commander who sends soldiers into an uncleared tunnel is betting their lives on intelligence that may be outdated, incomplete, or deliberately misleading. One misstep triggers a booby trap. One wrong turn leads into an ambush. The mission objective, eliminating a single Hamas commander, must be weighed against the risk of losing an entire team. The decision to proceed is not made lightly, but it is made, and once made, it cannot be undone. Intelligence work in environments like Gaza operates at the intersection of necessity and manipulation. The methods that make covert operations effective, deception, coercion, exploitation of vulnerability, are the same methods that erode moral boundaries and corrupt democratic accountability. Intelligence agencies justify these tactics by invoking national security and existential threat. But the justification does not erase the moral damage inflicted on those who carry out the operations, on the societies they serve, and on the individuals whose lives become collateral in the intelligence war. Scholars who study intelligence ethics describe this phenomenon as moral injury, the psychological and ethical harm experienced by operators who are required to commit acts that violate their own moral beliefs in service of a larger mission. Case officers who manipulate vulnerable people into becoming informants carry that weight long after the operation ends. Soldiers who kill in close quarters combat inside dark tunnels carry the memory of every decision made in fractions of a second. And the question remains, does the mission justify the cost? Not just the operational cost, but the human cost, the moral cost, the cost to the principles that democratic societies claim to defend. If this operation opened your eyes to how real spy work actually operates in the shadows, subscribe to Hidden Ops for more true missions from the world of Covert. Intelligence,